So I was thinking about, what would be interesting to say or what could be enlightening as you think about both, being an entrepreneur and launching your career and where you're focused. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about, what personally I care about and kind of how that's directed the businesses that I've started, the ones that I've been involved with, and where I'm at today, and then actually how I think about entrepreneurship and the things that I think are really important as you think about those ventures and as you form new companies and as you get involved in those various things. So I kind of left the title of The Science Behind the Magic. Obviously, that's from the Disney world. But I actually believe there is some science behind how you build your career and how you think about the things that you want to be involved in and what you become and what you do next. Reid Hoffman wrote a book called The Startup of You, which I think is really fascinating. And as I think about myself, it's very unlikely that no matter what you do, start a business today, go work for a large company, that you'll end up in the same place for a long duration of time. In today's world, we're switching jobs more quickly, or you're finding a new idea that you want to go be involved with. One of the only companies that I know that where you actually work for a really long time are companies like Disney, which are really large. It's not unusual that I run into someone who's been there for 30 to 40 years. But in most areas of the country, that's actually not true. You are working on a career path, and so when you start to think about yourself and you start to think about where you want to head, I really do believe that you kind of own the evolution of your career. And it's not a job, it's a career. And it really becomes important that you manage the steps that you're about to take, because they're going to be different for everyone, and you're going to be involved in a lot of things. I love in the book that it says, adapt to the future, invest in yourself, and transform your career. We don't know where all of the economies of the world will be, where all of the technology will be in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. What we do know is it's going to change. What we do know is there's going to be a lot of opportunities. And I know for a fact that if you don't actively manage yourself and your career, you won't end up where you want to be. And it takes work in order to do that. And I really believe if you think about that even now, starting out early in your career, you'll get opportunities that you might not have received had you not thought about that. When I came out of my computer science undergrad, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I did know one thing: I was never going to program. Hate development. But I knew that if I had a strong technical degree undergrad, that I could have lots of doors open to me. So I wanted a really amazing technology foundation, and then I figured I could go figure out what that meant. And what you find once you go into the workplace and once you start working on businesses are that there's no one job definition that you'll become. There's a million of them. There's a million different things that you can do with whatever your education is and with whatever your passion is. And if you set yourself up for success, you ultimately find it. And you can transform your career. You can own what that becomes, especially as you learn and pay the price along some of the rounds. Actually, I think some of those slides are missing. I'm going to switch over. Sorry. There's a series of slides that are not on there. Is your key drive still on here? I don't know why they didn't come over. So let me tell you a little bit about how my foundation of what my career has become, and then I'll tell you a little bit about some of the startups I've done. So one of the things about me is I love technology. I love everything about technology. I love what it enables. I love what it does for us personally. I love everything that we can do with that. And so for me, even in my early college days, that was a big part of it. So whether I was taking my electrical engineering classes or my computer science classes, I love technology. And I love the opportunities that affords us, not only in the business world, but personally. So I always keep up on technology trends. I'm always watching what's happening there. And that really has become a cornerstone of all of the things that I do. Because I believe that sometimes we get told that you have to be passionate about what you go after. But that doesn't mean that you end up in the career that you're just passionate about. Because I believe passions apply to all sorts of things. So I happen to love technology. And I do lots of technology startups. But I also use technology in all the other companies that I work with. I work with a number of companies that aren't even technology-based. And I sit on their boards. And even then, technology still comes to how we start to evolve the business. So for me, technology is an underlying thing, and I care passionately about it, and I love it. I also love strategies of customers. So for me, over the course of my career, one of the things that I've really honed in on is I care a lot about how you acquire customers for a business. I care a lot about how you think about acquisition. I care a lot about how you manage that, how you measure that, how if you build an application, how you think about adoption. At FamilyLink, we grew our platform to 80 million users over the course of 24 months. We had 26 million monthly active users at the height of the application. That's a lot of users, right? But what we learned really how to do really, really well was customer acquisition. We learned how to create frictionless processes. We learned how to watch the analytics and drive people through a process, and those become really important. And a lot of times I find myself now, whether I am helping businesses or I'm starting my own, it's all about how we acquire customers, how we engage them, and how we keep them coming back to buy whatever it is we're selling. So for me, I found that over the time, I really care a lot about that, and my mind naturally goes to solving those problems. I was talking with a company who has a travel site, and they want to build a social community about the travel site. So the very first conversation we have as I start thinking about that goes straight to customers. Okay, how many times do you go on a vacation where you want to meet up with a local? First of all, the average person only goes on a really cool vacation maybe once a year. Right, so then you go all the way back into their business model and go, well, if they don't solve frequency of use, their application will actually have an adoption problem. The reason Instagram is popular is because all of us take a picture every day. Frequency of use is really, really high. And so I can take a photo, I can share it, therefore I'm going to be engaged with an application that solves a problem in that space and keep coming back. But in other areas, like I want to meet with locals on a vacation, it's totally different. My metric for going there is different, the reason that I go is different, and how you engage me is a completely different problem that you have to start figuring out how to solve. So I care a lot about these kind of things. I also care a ton about social. I started a company back in 2005 before podcast was even a term that showed up in iTunes that was all focused on podcasting. And since then, when Twitter very first started and LinkedIn, I love how social has transformed marketing. People often say, hey, come talk about social marketing. And in today's world, I believe social is marketing. It is the channel that you go after. It is how you engage customers. It just depends on if I'm a B2C company or a B2B company or who I'm trying to go after, what I use. But I think it's very fascinating how it has transformed our marketing industries, and it has made it easy for me to test customer acquisition strategies. It's made it easy for me to optimize, and I can most likely tell you in a couple of days, if not hours, if something is going to work in order to bring people back and keep them engaged. So I care about those, and you start, in my career, I've seen an intersection as I work on all of those. And I've obviously combined those in a lot of the things that I've done. So when I started my career, I actually went to a big corporation. So I went to Novell. At the time, it was a really big company. We had, I think, 8,000 employees still at the time when I went there. And it was a great move. And I actually think over the last, 10, 20 years, we've seen a really dramatic change from when you guys go out from your education. Entrepreneurialism is a much bigger trend than it ever was 10, 15, 20 years ago. Everyone was going into corporate. But for me, it was a great choice. I went into a company and I learned a ton of what I could do. But as the dot-com bubble kind of hit, it became very evident to me that I wanted to be involved in startups, that I wanted to go start my own companies, and that I wanted to figure out what that meant. So I spent a lot of time on both the business-to-business side, building enterprise search applications, distributed content management applications, and then also on the consumer side, everything from trying to figure out, we did a startup where we were trying to figure out how you can order food from your seat and in a sporting event and have it delivered to you from your iPhone. Right, so cool applications like that, to applications like Family Link, to some of the stuff I'm doing today in the 3D printing world. There's a lot of really cool things that I've been able to do that combined all of these things. And I'll show you some more examples as I go through. So let me give you my entrepreneurial advice. So as I think about how I form businesses or things that I've learned along the course of all of these activities. So as Aubrey said, I spend some of my time working with Disney and a lot with the Disney research team. So Disney Research is the technology arm of Disney, all about solving really hard problems that will hit us in the next 3 to 5 years. There are researchers that are coming out of Carnegie Mellon, out of MIT, out of Harvard, out of ETH in Switzerland, and then even in internal organizations like Pixar and animation. We're solving these really hard problems, and we're trying to figure out what we do with them, how we productize them. And it's been really fun to do that from the corporate perspective, in addition to starting and working on some of my businesses. And the combination of that is going to lead to some of the pointers I have for you today. So this is one that I really believe in. And having started partnerships that have both worked really well and really poorly, I believe at the end of the day that teams win and ideas don't. I promise if you come to sell me an idea, chances of someone else thinking about the same thing are really high. There's always people thinking about how you solve problems. The take might be a little bit different, but people are always thinking about how to solve things. And there's a lot of smart people in the world. And especially when you work in technology, you're competing against the brightest minds in the whole world that are trying to solve technology problems. So there's lots of people with great ideas and even common ideas, but I will tell you from experience, it is teams that make the difference. They are the people that you partner with. They are the people that you invest your time and energy with. And if you don't make a good choice when you're going into an entrepreneurial venture, it will end up hurting you. Sometimes you think about going into partnerships with friends or family or all sorts of things. At the end of the day, you have to remember, first and foremost, it's business. And we're making a business venture here that we want to change the world, that we want to be really successful at. And you have to have the people on the bus who can make it happen and who can work with you. It's really frustrating when you get into a partnership and 6 months down the road you go, "God, I actually don't want to be partners with that person anymore. And how do I get them out of the business? And can I even keep the business moving?" Because it creates bad feelings. Sometimes you can't even get out of them. Sometimes it will stop the business. And because business is all about execution, if you don't have the right people with you and you don't keep moving and just making things happen, you ultimately won't be successful. And it is never a good idea to keep the wrong people on the bus for any amount of time. Which sounds really harsh, but I will tell you that if you keep people on the bus who can't do the job or who can't step up to accomplish what you want, it's not going to do you any good. And it doesn't mean you have to be you should still be compassionate to people. You're still talking about livelihoods of people and careers. But when it's your venture and you're trying to make it successful, the wrong people, keeping them on longer, will not help you move forward. And most likely there is no scenario under which you can change that. So if you're thinking about starting a startup or you're going into a business, remember, people matter a ton. And you want to work with good people and you want to be moving in the same direction. And if you're not, be very wary about going into that. And it doesn't mean over the course of your career you won't work with some bad people. It's just the what-so of building a career. But you'll find that when you work with great people, it makes a huge difference. And you'll be a lot more successful than if you don't. So one of my other theories in business, and even personally, is don't shut your own doors. So very, very often, people will build entire stories, scenarios, and analysis around why they shouldn't do something before they've even done it. Right? Anyone guilty of that? Yeah, okay, right? We do this all of the time, where you can come up with 100 reasons why it's going to fail, or why there's too much risk, or why you shouldn't go do it. In the world today, everyone else is going to shut all the doors for you before you can even do it for yourself. So why do it way ahead of when you know what it is you're trying to accomplish? Perfect example for me was a long time ago when I applied to grad school, coming out of computer science. I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. So I did 100 job interviews through the Career Service Department, and I took the GRE, and I took the GMAT, and I applied to a bunch of schools. Because I didn't know if I'd get in, and I didn't know what that would look like. But I figured, what the heck? What's the worst they're going to do? Tell me no? Right? And so you have to, I really believe, have that mentality in everything you do. Say, look, I'm just going to go for it. Somewhere along the line, someone is going to tell me a reason that I can't move forward or this won't work. But I believe that you shouldn't be that person that does it for yourself. You shouldn't do it way ahead of when the critical decision point is actually there. It will make you a lot more successful. Plus, you'll find opportunities that you can never find if you stopped doing that ahead of time. It's true personally, and it's true in business. There's a deal you won't get because it doesn't make sense. I was literally on the phone with a CEO of a company this morning. They're hundreds of millions of dollars. And I can see in his mind working up all of the reasons why we might not go structure a deal. But the deal's not on the table, and we don't even know what it means yet. And so I kept saying, look, let's just keep moving forward. Let's go do the amazing pitch. Let's see if we win the business, because we can always say no. But if they didn't give us the offer, we can't say yes. And I think that's a really sound advice when you're trying to solve problems and trying to get through things that you don't know the answer to today. It's easy to build up the reasons you can't be successful before you're there. Okay, be the problem solver. So a lot of times when you work on teams and when you work in businesses and you start ventures, and you can even think of yourself in this situation, someone will say, hey, we need to go do X, Y, Z, or we're running into this specific problem, and someone will say, well, we can't solve that, or there's no way around that, or that's just the big barrier. This happens all of the time, even on small things. So we're going to go do a play test in the parks for a specific technology. It's easy to imagine all of the barriers that you can create as to why it would be too difficult to launch something. You can come up with them all the time. But what you want on your team and what you want to be is the person who can solve the problem. You want to be the person who goes, well, that's really true, but why don't we just make this trade-off and we can still accomplish and still launch the product on time and hit this date. That's the person that you want to be. Last week, Jeff Bezos spoke at the UTC Hall of Fame, and my favorite quote that he said was, be stubborn on vision and flexible on the details, which I thought was a great quote, which for me somewhat goes to this. Where you want to head, the problem you want to solve, however you want to change the world, don't lose that. Be stubborn on the vision. Go after accomplishing that. But the details for how you get there are not set in stone, and none of us know the path to get you there. There isn't one person in the room that can guarantee if you start a business today or you go work on a project exactly what the outcome will be. There's just no way to know that. So you have to be flexible on the details. When the problem comes up, you want to be the person in the room that's creatively solving that problem. You want to be the person in the room that throws out 10 other ways to start working through that. One of my colleagues at Disney said to me a couple of months ago, they're like, how come Sid, every time when someone throws a problem, you are always willing to say, oh, great, we can go solve that. That's no big deal. And it's actually because I believe that. I believe that we can solve any problems, that there's other ways around them. And when you're in a meeting, if you're the person on the side that says, hey, we can go solve that, the reaction that you get and the way that people work with you is very different than if you are the naysayer or if you are the person helping to build the reasons why something can't get accomplished. You want to just power through. You want to make things happen. One of the other things that I wanted to throw out for you is I really believe in managing by facts. This is a lesson that I've learned a long time ago and that I still believe in. So how often do you, say you go into a team session or you're dealing with someone in your work environment and it gets all emotional? Does that ever happen? Right, people get frustrated, they get emotional, they yell. Right? It's never a good scenario and it never has a good outcome. I remember years ago when I was responsible for all of the sales training, and when I ran product management, one of my jobs was to always do all the sales calls. So I would go do all the sales calls, and there was a sales rep, and I can't even remember why she got so upset with me, but she was really upset with something that I'd done or something that we hadn't done. And she sent this email to all the other executives on our team, and she CC'd everyone, and it was clearly kind of a mix between a personal attack and something else. So I remember these moments in time become the points when you have a decision to make about how you'll act and how you'll kind of be perceived. So remember, faced with that email, and your initial reaction is always to write the email back that totally slams the person, right? That's the easiest thing to do. So I wrote that email, and I didn't send it. And I sent a different, and then I slept on it, and the next day I sent a totally different email. So I've come to this philosophy of, first of all, you have to leave emotion at the door. You can never manage an emotional situation, and you'll never win, and it's never worth it. And even if someone attacks you, and even if someone comes after you, it's never worth that conversation. So if I get really mad at someone, or someone sends that email to me, I might write the email, and I'll never send it, ever. Because there is no good scenario that will come out of being the person that is attacking other people, that's putting other people down, or trying to show that you're better than someone. It just doesn't work that way. And the people and ultimately, not only are you trying to manage people by fact, which is a great leadership quality, but you want to manage a business by fact. When we built Family Link, the most important thing to us were the analytics and the metrics. So I can't tell you how often someone comes up with an idea, and they'll tell me how great their business is doing, and they'll say, and we need to increase it by 20%, or we need to head here. And I'll say, okay, well, give me the numbers. So how many people come to the website? How many people are buying? How many people abandon the process? At what point are they driving? What tools are you using, or what methods are driving the most leads to the site? And what are you doing with those leads after? And what are the metrics through every stage? And for most people, they haven't managed their business that way. You have to manage everything by the numbers. I'm a huge analytics fan. If you give me a company to look at, the first thing I will do is ask for all the numbers. And the next thing I'll do is build a hypothesis behind the numbers, and then a strategy for how you fix that. If you are doing something, the most important thing you can do is know the numbers of your business. We knew, and Facebook has actually done a fabulous job of this. When Facebook very first started and they moved out of the college realm into the social realm, they spent a ton of time knowing their data. So they know things like if you have 135 friends, you would stay connected on Facebook. If you didn't have 135 friends after you initially signed up, you would most likely abandon. So they spent all of this time in their product development and in their UX, their user experience, saying, how do we convince you to get 135 friends? And early on, what they would do, and even if you're a new user and you don't have 135 friends, you'll start to see things in Facebook that say, suggest that this person does this. Right? I'll start to see that for people who aren't very active. It will suggest friends for me. It's because they know the numbers. They know that if they can get you to come and do that, that you will stay on their platform. And every business has some metric like that. Some metric that is the success metric for the business, that if you know it, you will be super successful. And the people who have figured that out are the ones that can start to understand how to really build a business model and accelerate it and scale it. And they can be even silly, simple things. Like there's a stat out there that says for every YouTube video, for every retweet of a YouTube video, it leads to 7 views. Okay, if I start to know that and I'm trying to promote something, what do you think I do? I build an entire strategy if I have a video around how I get people to retweet that because I know that it has a network effect. And you want to know those things for your business. You know, we at Family Link knew every metric for how many people visited the site, how many family members that they requested, what their time on page was. You name some metric, we knew it very, very intimately. And you want to know those things for your business. If you're building something, know the model behind it. Because otherwise you can't do it. And I also think it leaves emotion at the table. When you walk into a meeting and everyone says, hey, we should go do this strategy, right? Let's go launch this product, or let's go to this event, or let's go do this. If you don't have numbers, it becomes a personal opinion weighed against someone else's personal opinion. And sometimes that's just the decision that has to get made. But if you at least have the numbers behind it, you'll make much smarter decisions. There's an e-commerce retail site that I work with the board on, and we want to grow their online business. It's a children's clothing company, and we want to grow their online business significantly. The first thing we had to do is pull all of the data to say, okay, how many people are coming to the website? What's their repeat usage? How are they converting? And by then having that information, we are now deploying tactics where we can see the success of that. So I would argue very strongly that you have to think about facts. The more you can leave emotion out of business, the better off you are. And I think if you're working with someone who's a personal friend or a family member, you have to even be more diligent at that. It's even harder. It adds a layer of complexity that's very difficult to solve. I wanted to throw out this one too, because I really believe this is interesting. I think you have to be creative. I think you have to be the person in the room who's throwing out creative ideas for how to solve things. You have to be the one where someone throws out a problem and you go, well, we could solve it 5 other ways than what you're thinking today. We can go after doing this scenario instead of something else that you're thinking. You know, we want to go, we're doing a retail product and, you know, this product only ever shows up on the shelf in Walmart. What happens if we go and we do the home shopping network? I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with the Aura Brush guys if they haven't shown up here. Right, but they do the tongue cleaner, right? And they've done an amazingly great job at being creative. At least in the early days of launch, it was all about the video. Well, how often do you buy a tongue cleaner online or a toothbrush online? I'm a huge Amazon shopper. I would never buy a toothbrush on Amazon because I wouldn't actually even think about it in that context. They did a great job building an online community in order to drive that conversion. It's a creative way to start thinking out of the box. Every business has creative things, or if you start thinking about what those go-to-market strategies are or how you engage your customers, you can do it better than someone else, and you can engage those people in a way that no one else can engage them with and start to change the world. If, just as an example of really great creativity, if you haven't been to Disneyland since the summer, one of the things if you go to the park that you'll see are you can buy a Mickey hat and it has glow ears, but they're infrared enabled, and so they glow with any nighttime spectacular. So if you wear the Mickey hat, you actually become part of the show. Mickey hats have been sold for how long? Since the park was open, right? But you start thinking of creative ways to make an experience stronger or drive a story. It starts to totally transform experiences people have with the brand. When you watch 4,000 Hats interact with World of Color, it's amazing to be able to do that. And it's a really creative solution to something that is all about creating immersive experiences. And I think that's the type of creativity you're looking for. You're looking for, I'll call them magical experiences from the Disney perspective, that change the way people think about stuff, that change the way they interact with you. And you want to think outside the box. You don't have to do the same thing that everyone else did. You just, if you know all the other things, like the analytics, you can make really smart decisions for your business. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about building a network. So how many of you think you're really great at building a network? And you have a really great network of people even in school or in your business life? Not one hand? What's that? Okay, we got a couple of people. I believe that your network is the most important thing that you can build over the course of your career. So if you go all the way back to Reid Hoffman, right, your career is an asset that you're managing. I can promise you right now, you have no idea what job you're going to be in 15 years from now. I can pretty much guarantee it. Unless you're going into medicine, but even then, I bet you don't know where you'll eventually be. So I think there's all of these things that you're going to run across in the course of your life. And I believe that your network is one of the most important assets that you can build, both as an entrepreneur and as a person who's trying to build a career, support a family, and do all of those things. I believe that you have to build it from the very beginning. When I very first started working at Novell, and I was on the I very first started actually in tech support, and I took that job because they would work with my daytime MBA schedule so I could go to school full-time and work full-time. They don't let you do that anymore, and I didn't tell them when I did it anyway. But I wanted to be able to go to school and work, and a lot of the people that I worked with were really great at building a network. I had an opportunity the first year that I worked for Novell to go around the world and be one of their trainers on advanced NDS troubleshooting. But it allowed me to start building this really great network of people. And the people that I worked with over the course of my career at Novell are still really great friends today, and they're still really strong members of my community, and they are all over the technology community. I believe that no matter where you go, no matter what people you meet, that you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't start to network with them. And networking, people always, you're like, well, what is that, right? Is it sending Sid an email and saying, hey, I would like to connect with you on LinkedIn? That's not a network. That's not even a relationship, right? That's a request to connect on a social networking platform. What you're really looking for are when you do meetings with people, when you run into people, that you walk away with some foundation of a relationship that allows you to go back to them if you need to connect with them on some other level. And my philosophy on creating relationships is never that the first time I meet you, I'm looking for what you can give me. My first and foremost foundation is how do I just meet this great person, and then over the course of time, if our paths cross or if it makes sense to connect, how do we do that? I think you have to be very careful on relationships. You can go into sales mode, and it can be all about you. But the best relationships are created from those where you're willing to give them time and energy, and you have no idea if it will ever come back to you. Because the one thing I've learned in business is your paths will cross time and time again. Over the course of your career in common industries, people that I started working with 15 years ago are still people that I run into in markets today. And it comes full circle in anything that you do. The other thing I will tell you is a network takes a lot of time. A lot of times I run into people who are in careers and who will say, I just don't have time to go network. I don't have time to go talk to anyone else, spending 80 hours a week at my job. But I'm telling you, your career is about you. So you have to find time to go talk to people. You have to find time to show up at industry events. You have to find time to go do a handful of lunches with people that you've just met. You have to find time to provide mentoring if you want to, because it becomes the thing that is constant throughout your career. Your job won't be, the people you work for won't be, but your network is really constant. And a lot of people don't even think about their network until it's too late. Having had a lot of friends go through the recession in 2008, had lots of friends who lost jobs and who had to go find entirely new careers inside of that. My sister lives in New York City, and they live in the Harlem ward, and I remember when 2008 hit, half of her ward was unemployed literally overnight. And you think about those things, how are those people going to go find new jobs in a really tough economy with a very competitive workforce? Your only option is if you have a network and you've proven that you're willing to play in the network and be the relationship person even when you didn't need to be. And it takes time and effort. You actually have to get out of the office and go show up at something and shake some people's hands. And not only do you have to show up, but you actually have to make the effort to meet people, which is also really hard for people. It's lots easier to show up at some lunch thing and sit in the back corner and grab lunch and leave than it is to actually talk to people. It's hard to go talk to new people. It's hard to figure out how to pull a conversation out of them, but that's what you're looking for. So I really recommend that not only while you're in school, but when you're in your very first jobs, even if you think about it as a college job, you will run into those people again. They will refer you, they will become good advocates for you, and they will help mentor you. And I would strongly recommend that you build your network now and that you consciously think about that at every place that you go. When I talk to someone on the phone and I'm closing a sales deal, I always connect with them on LinkedIn. That's my first step. I immediately connect with someone on LinkedIn, which I would recommend you always do, especially in the business context. You can even tell them why, hey, great to meet you, stay connected. And then I think you have to take the extra effort to be willing to help other people along the way. And you just have to do it. It's just the right thing to do inside of those contexts. And for me, that's been an important thing. So Bree mentioned the Women Tech Council. I co-founded and we started the Women Tech Council 6 years ago just to be a community for women, for networking, mentoring, visibility, and to drive and to create economic impact for women. And it has been a fabulous thing. I probably could not have done anything that has more significantly not just helped the community, but also helped me personally. And my motivation was never me personally. I didn't start the organization to say, hey, how can I go build my network, or how can I go meet more people? It was really about seeing that need. And the fruits of the labor that we have had there have really paid off in being able to help literally thousands of women in technology and build a community that's really unlike any other community for those people. And it's all volunteer, so none of us get paid. We spend hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours a year working on that project. And it's been well worth the effort. And I think you have to find time to do those things for yourself. I'm going to jump to this one for a second. So don't be afraid to fail. There's this product validation methodology that I am a huge fan of. So when you're building a product, it's really easy to build a product and then take it to market and then iterate on it. But the methodology that works better is to figure out how to fail fast. And so how to come up with an idea, get it in front of actual buyers, see if they will actually pay for it, and if they won't, move on to the next thing or modify it or make differences in that. So as an example, a number of years ago, does everyone in here use Dropbox or know what Dropbox is? So we would argue that we built the Dropbox before Dropbox, but it never went to market because we didn't do all the things that we wanted to. But the predecessor to our application that was Dropbox-like was actually this web project management thing, which sounds so silly in today's world. But we started this validation methodology. And the validation methodology we do asks very specific questions about why you will use it, what your profile is, we're going to tell you the limitations of the product. So I'll actually tell you what it doesn't do. People hate doing that. Sales guys hate when you do that, but if you'll do it, you'll actually get the right answers. So I remember we were on the road for about 3 months, and we were pitching this product. And it was a product focused on this new collaboration idea. And we were kind of about middle of the road on the results that we had received. But we had been in meetings with all the right buyers, all the right decision makers, and all of the right users. So we were pitching this, and we were in California, and I was doing the pitch, and there were 15 people in the room. The guy who had the budget's in the room, the person who would use it's in the room, and the IT guys are in the room. So we're pitching the product, and about an hour into it, every head is shaking that they love this product. They're giving us great feedback. They meet our demographics. I walk them through the limitation slides, so I'm like, it won't work with these things. I give them, and then I get to the justification and procurement slides. And the first question we usually ask is, so will this fit in and how? And I remember the two lead people looking at each other and going, well, I don't think anyone in my department would use it. How about anyone in your department? And I go, oh, well, maybe one person. So now all of a sudden, the size of my deal went from 5,000 potential people to 1. Right? And that actually became the pivot point where we decided to kill that project and work on another project. But the cost of spending 3 months on the road and doing the product validation saved us literally hundreds of thousands of dollars from what we would have done on the engineering side. It is a very, very, very bad idea to build and then validate. You probably are all getting fairly exposed to things like agile development methodologies and Scrum. And the reason that those exist is because we're trying to get you to fail fast. Obviously, we want you to succeed, but if it's going to fail, fail fast. Right? Get all of the risk up front, know why people won't buy up front, and then figure that out and then make the changes based on the data that's coming in. And you can't be afraid to fail. A lot of times we get so passionate about what the idea is, when we get the bad data coming in, we don't know how to alter it. And it's not a bad thing, again, back to Jeff Bezos, to say, be stubborn on vision, but flexible on the details. Your vision for what you're trying to accomplish might be awesome, but the detail for how you get there and the first implementation you took to market might have been a really bad idea, and one that you could just never power through and that you could never solve. So as an aside, on the company that we worked with, or we did the in-stadium food purchasing, So this is a great idea, and it's still not quite available in the market today, but not because it's not a great idea, but it's because you actually couldn't solve the problem, and you still can't today. So what happens when you go to the BYU football game and you pull up your smartphone? You get no reception, right? You can't send a text, you can't check it on Facebook. So how in the world are you going to get someone to order food so you can deliver it to their seat? Right? Like, even ignoring operational problems, right? My first problem is one, if you think of that startup, which is an awesome idea, and I still totally love it today, as a startup, I can't go solve a mesh network problem in a really large stadium. If you think of New Meadowlands Stadium back east, I think they spent roughly, I don't know, $50 to $100 million on their mesh network for the Giants and the Jets. We can't go solve that problem. We can't get 80,000 people on a cellular network inside of a park in order to just drive a business model that then has low margins. So it's not that it was a bad idea, but timing of that actually didn't make sense. But it's still a great idea, and I promise you over the next 5 years, as high-density networks get deployed, we'll start to see more solutions like that. But that's what I mean by you've got, your vision doesn't have to change, but sometimes the details, and it's much better to know before you spend $10 million building that startup that those problems exist and that we might not be able to get through them, so we might alter the way in which we start to solve those problems. And those happen time and time again. So my recommendation to you, especially if you're building software or you're going after e-commerce, or even if you're going after a physical goods product, do as much validation as you can up front. Don't be afraid to fail, and and make sure you understand the false positives. If I were to throw a business idea out to you guys, I promise you most of you would say, oh, Sid, yeah, that's a good idea. But you're lying to me, most likely. This is how it is. And you didn't mean to. You're just trying to be nice, right? People often tell me when people come and pitch ideas, if I think it's somewhat questionable, I'll usually say, okay, well, that's a really interesting idea, right? Because I'm also not going to say, okay, you're crazy, that's never going to work, here's the 15 reasons. Right? I'm not going to say that. So when you're building a business and you're asking your wife, your husband, your mom, your dad, your best friend, if this is a cool idea, what are they going to tell you? They're going to tell you it's a great idea, go do it, right? Not very likely are they going to tell you. So what you really want to do is go figure out who's the person who would buy the product, find a bunch of people like that who would buy the product, and then actually tell them what it does in the 1.0 version, what it won't do in the 1.0 version, and figure out how much money they would be willing to pay for it. I mean, ultimately, until I take money out of your hand or an email address out of your hand, I don't know what you're willing to pay for something, but I can get really close to it if I'm really smart on validation. And I think you have to get really, really good at doing that when you build businesses. And it doesn't matter if you're just building a startup or if you're building a new product in a large company. The same principles apply. It is very, very costly to build a product and fail after. Having done that before, it is very, very expensive. The first startup that I did was called NextPage, and we raised $58 million in venture funding for the deal. So we raised a lot of money, and we also burned a lot of money trying to figure out what we were going to do. And that's true in lots of companies, right? The color guys raised $48 million and really never even have a product to market. So it's not a common thing in the world, but today, money is really hard to come by. Venture capital is very hard to get. There's not money flowing like there was 5 or 6 years ago. So the more that you can know about why someone will buy, how you scale the market, and solving those problems, I think the more successful you will become over time. Okay, great. So what I also wanted to just say as we were kind of thinking about this is just remember to have the right perspective on everything that you're doing. Your entrepreneurial venture is one, or your job is going to be one thing in the host of an entire career. So don't forget that that's the perspective. When someone gets mad or when you get frustrated in your business, just remember that it's just a moment in time, that it's not worth hurting relationships over. It's never worth saying something that hurts a relationship or that you can't recover. And it's always worth just remembering that you can solve the problems, that you power through them, and then making decisions along the course of that. And remember, you are really responsible for your entire career. You're responsible for the outcomes of those ventures. You're responsible for your actions inside of those. And how you apply the tools that you know in those scenarios is what's going to lead to your success or failure. And I really believe you own that. And I really believe that although I've been in many a company where, like, I have one job where I always say, this was the worst job I ever had. The third day in, I was sitting down with a member of the executive team, and I said, so how do you think this is going to fare? This is my third day after they recruited me to come in. And they say, well, I think you got a 50-50 chance of being successful. It was a really bad job. It was a really bad scenario. But at the same time, I always believe that all of those become stepping stones for where you're at. And even in that context, I didn't leave it in a bad scenario. Right? I didn't create an environment that it wasn't just going to be in time, because you can change everything. And I really just want to encourage you to remember that and put everything that you do kind of in perspective of how things happen, because you have an entire career in front of you. And own it, right? You guys are bright, smart people who are going out into a workforce, and we need nothing more than great startup ventures in the community today that ultimately grow jobs, that ultimately change the world from where we're at. And you do that by making all of these great choices as you go into that. And if you can build those great companies, you will literally impact thousands of lives from those entrepreneurial ventures. And that's a really powerful thing to do for the cause of the world, I think, and for the cause of the communities that we live in and your families and the difference that you can make. But you can only do those things if you manage yourself in that way, and if you take and make those right choices, I think, when you're sitting inside of those decisions that become tough that you do every day. So with that, I think we're out of time. So thank you for letting me come.